Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publicists Association's Let It Be Known. And already, as Power 96 says, happy Wednesday, and the chickens are coming home to roost for former President Donald Trump. We'll tell you about the latest this morning. And also, uh, big news in the Serena Williams household. Welcome, baby number two for Serena Williams. And this weekend marks the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington, an event that has left an indelible mark on the struggle for civil rights and equality. We'll tell you about a special event that's happening tomorrow with two special guests this morning. But first, Donald Trump, as law enforcement officials began to prepare for Trump's surrender on Thursday at the Fulton County Jail on charges he illegally conspired to overturn his 2020 election. Lost two of the former president's co-defendants turned themselves in, while two others appealed to a federal judge for permission not to show up at all. John Eastman, a conservative attorney and the legal architect of a plan to use false slates of Republican electors to keep Trump in office, reported to the jail yesterday, becoming the first Trump advisor to be formally booked in the sprawling criminal racketeering case alleging that he, Trump, and 17 others were part of a vast criminal enterprise to reverse Joe Biden's 2020 win in Georgia. Eastman was released on a $100,000 bond shortly after the surrender of another co-defendant in the Georgia case, Scott Hall, a bail bondsman implicated in the alleged breach of election data in Coffee County, Georgia. He was released on $10,000 bail. Also, another we learned that Jenna Ellis was also turned herself in, and she had to post a $100,000 bail. But as the bail negotiations continued yesterday for others who are charged in the case, two other former Trump advisors asked a federal judge to block Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis's from her order from having them arrested as they seek to move their cases from state court into federal court. Former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and former Justice Department official Jeffrey Clark filed separate emergency motions asking the U.S. District Court Judge Steve Jones to stay the Fulton County case and allow them to ignore a deadline set by the district attorney to surrender by noon on Friday until he rules on whether their cases can be moved out of state. Well, Mark Meadows has really been put through the ringer on all of these different charges. He's caught in the middle. There's been rumors of him being the individual who has turned state's evidence, or at least on the federal side, but there's been no confirmation of that. He filed a motion late Tuesday afternoon, and it included emails between his legal team and the district attorney asking her to consider deferring Mark Meadows' voluntary, quote unquote, voluntary surrender in the Georgia case to at least next week after a federal court hearing that's scheduled for Monday on Mark Meadows' request to move the case to federal court. But of course, Fani Willis refused. She says, I am not granting any extensions. Uh, she is not playing, folks. She on Tuesday disclosed part of Meadows' motion. She says, I gave 2 weeks for people to surrender themselves to the court. He told his attorneys, your client is no different than any other criminal defendant in this jurisdiction. The 2-week window that Fani Willis imposed, she wrote, was a, quote, tremendous courtesy. And we've talked about this on this program many times. You know, Barrington has talked about it. Austin has talked about it. Anybody else don't get that courtesy. So she says at 12:30 p.m. on Friday, I shall file warrants in the system for those who have not turned themselves in. Mark Meadows' attorney pressed the judge to issue a order prohibiting the district attorney from arresting or causing the arrest of Mark Meadows before Monday's hearing. His It's unbelievable what these guys are doing. Clark's attorneys made a similar request, and um, Jones ordered Fulton County, the judge that is, ordered Fulton County prosecutors to respond to the filings today. Willis has also been ordered to respond to Mark Meadows' removal request also today. Um, someone posting under the Christ Episcopal Church of Miami wrote, I posted some DCA to Atlanta Delta flight options for Mark Meadows last evening on Facebook. Oh, that's Austin. Uh, Greer, did you know Austin was, he owned the church? I'm sure he doesn't own the church. But these, we've talked about this a lot. Austin is writing in, and uh, they just want special treatment, but they also wanted to move to federal court with the idea that the jury pool will be different. And Greer says, Austin, she didn't know you were moonlighting. But they wanted the federal court for a lot of reasons. And Fonnie Willis is saying, nope, nope, this, you committed these crimes. This is a state crime. There are federal charges pending, at least against Trump and Meadows, for I believe Eastman too. We've already reported on these things, but they want special treatment. They want a favorable judge. You know, Trump has, of course, appointed many federal judges, including the judge down in Florida that's handling the documents case, who is, as Barrington said, on the verge of being tossed from that case. I mean, so many egregious things that she's done outwardly, overtly, things that she's done there to show her loyalty to Trump, as she supposedly heads that case, or oversees that case anyway, down in Florida. We'll see what happens there. And the score is 2 and plenty of love for Serena Williams and Alexis Ohanian. That's her husband. The couple have welcomed their second daughter, according to a post on Serena's husband's verified Instagram account. He writes, welcome Adira River Ohanian. He wrote in a post featuring a series of family photos with the newborn. He says, I'm grateful to report our house is teeming with love, a happy and healthy newborn girl, and happy and healthy mama. The tech entrepreneur went on to write, feeling grateful at Serena Williams. You've now given me another incomparable gift. You're the GMOAT, he wrote. Thanks to all the amazing medical staff who took care of my wife and our daughter. I'll never forget the moment I introduced at Olympia Ohanian to her baby sister. We recall Serena really went through it on the first birth that she gave with Olympia. She wrote about it, underscoring the plight of Black women everywhere when it comes to maternal health and the treatments that they receive in the medical, in the operating room. Well, in the delivery room, not operating room, in the delivery room. Well, in hospitals in general. And now she's had a second healthy baby, and you see the picture there. You can see how happy. There was one video that the husband released of him sitting at a piano, and Serena gets up and she walks over to get the baby. Really nice photos of Serena. It's good to see that too. Again, when you consider what she went through with her first, in her own words, she almost died when she was trying to give birth to her first baby. And that was, as she wrote, in large part due to the medical staff ignoring her, ignoring the different issues that she was complaining about. And she finally is like, this is my body. I know my body, and you're not going to ignore me. And it just shows this is a global icon, a superstar who was getting this treatment, um, And Power 96 says, meanwhile, Black women in Mississippi and Louisiana are 4 times more likely to die during childbirth, and that's very true. We've seen the stats, and they remain unchanged, and that's unfortunate. We still waiting or hoping and pushing for something to be done about that. And one of the solutions, of course, is more people of color in that profession. Um, of course, that could help, but we need more. We need to eliminate racism altogether, but certainly racism in the medical field. Well, this weekend marks the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington, an event, of course, that we have been talking about, and everyone still talks about 60 years later. The struggle for civil rights and equality continues. This Thursday, tomorrow, at 4 p.m. Eastern, the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation will present the quote, Good Trouble Talk, a live virtual event featuring Courtland Cox, a pivotal figure in the civil rights movement who worked closely with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, during the turbulent times of the 1960s. Courtland was the program secretary for SNCC in 1962, a representative to the War Crimes Tribunal in 1963, and a key member of the steering committee for the 1963 March on Washington. His role in reshaping the trajectory of that historic event is a testament to his dedication to justice and equality. It will also feature the talk will also feature Michael Collins, a member of the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation Board and longtime chief of staff to Congressman John Lewis. We welcome now Courtland Cox. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Good to have you. This event that's coming up tomorrow. First of all, tell us about how excited you are to be participating in this virtual event.
Yeah, I think it's very important that we inform people and keep the history of what happened over 60 years ago alive and vibrant in the minds of particularly young people. Because really the only way we can continue our struggle is for the generations today and future generations to understand the long history of struggle that has happened in the United States. So tomorrow would be a good step in that whole effort.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mr. Cox, reflecting on your experiences with SNCC, could you share some of the challenges and triumphs you encountered while advocating for civil rights during that era?
Well, I think, I started in SNCC in 1960, just like John Lewis. I came out of Howard University. John Lewis and Diane Nash and others came out of FIS. And what we faced when we, as young people, was we could not go to a restaurant that we wanted to, or a movie house that we wanted to, or if you went into a department store, you couldn't try on any clothes. If you tried to get a job, you were handed a broom and a bucket and a pail, and black people couldn't vote. And really, as you saw in the case of Emmett Till and others, if a white man shot you, then nothing would happen. So, I mean, I think the oberdictum of the Dred Scott decision that a black man had no rights, that a white man need respect, was really what we faced in 1960.
Yeah, and as a key member of the steering committee for the 1963 March on Washington, walk us through, if you will, the process of organizing such a monumental event and the role it played in advancing the civil rights movement.
Well, one of the things that people really need to realize is the March on Washington was organized in 8 weeks. So really, we could not do much in terms of organizing. The Black community organized themselves. And at the end of the day, they were the ones who said, we are tired of racial and economic oppression. So once the call went out from A. Philip Randolph and the civil rights leadership, it was not the organizing we did in the central operation, but it was the desire of the African American community to really say, enough is enough. We're sick and tired of this racial and economic exploitation.
Yeah, sick and tired of being sick and tired, right?
No question.
And the march, of course, 60th anniversary coming up. A lot's happening. A lot is planned. How do you think the spirit of unity and activism during that time can inspire and guide the ongoing fight for justice and equality today?
I think the most important thing for today and for tomorrow is that when people look at what happened over the past 60 years and even before that, they understand in the essence the determination of the Black community. And important that certain of us, everybody's not going to do this, but certain of us become actors. Certain of us, as we used to say, put our bodies on the line, that to make the change. So change is not made by everybody, but it's made by a determined group of people who are prepared to make sure that the objectives and the ideals of human and civil rights are maintained. So I think the most important thing that I can say to people today is maintain a determination to, in your own mind, even if you don't do anything, make sure that you determine that you will support those who are engaged in the struggle for human and civil rights.
Yeah, we're talking to Courtland Cox, the SNCC representative and the steering committee for the March on Washington. Certainly, we know that we look at the civil rights movement today. We look at those who are taking, supposedly taking the lead today, and really, Courtland, it's only a handful. I mean, you yourself, of course, you have Andrew Young down in Atlanta, Jesse Jackson in Chicago. It's only a handful left, and not obvious for obvious reasons, right? I mean, 60 years ago, this happened, but um, when you think about your group, Dr. King, of course, included in that leadership, could you give us perhaps some comparisons or at least insight on leadership today when you think about you guys and how you guys led in the 60s and before?
At least I can't speak for Jesse or Andy or the rest of them, but I know what we're doing. One of the things that we did is we created what's something called a SNCC Legacy Project. And what we understood was the important for people who are living today to understand what happened in the past and understand it from our side and understand our saying. So those who want to understand what we did and what happened in the movement in the 1960s should go to snclegacyproject.org. There is a whole digital movement platform that you can understand and begin to see what happened yourself, because the stories are told from the bottom up and the inside out. But in addition, we are spending a lot of time, when I say we, the SNCC Legacy Project, are spending a lot of time with today's activists and today's organizers. So last February, we had a big meeting of the people who were engaged in the Dream Defenders and so forth, back after Trayvon Martin was killed. We're now going to meet with them in September, so that it does seem to me that so we're doing things at two levels. One, we have created the SNCC Legacy Project digital movement platform for people to understand what happened in the 1960s, and we're communicating directly with those who are engaged in struggle today to encourage them and to pass on our informational wealth so that they can go forward and make a difference.
Yeah, and Mr. Cox, you were instrumental in revising John Lewis's speech for the March on Washington. Can you shed light on the collaboration that took place and the significance of the message that was delivered that day?
Yeah, it's interesting because first of all, we did not, in fact, want to come to the SNCC did not really want to come to the March on Washington initially, early on, because most of us were in Mississippi and in Alabama doing, voter registration work. But I convinced, the organization to participate in the march. And what happened was that we wanted to tell the truth of what was happening. in Mississippi and Alabama, Southwest Georgia, Arkansas, what we were happening to Black people. And so we wanted to deliver that message. The Kennedy administration felt that at first opposed the march, but then decided they wanted to control it, and they wanted to make sure that the march represented their interest, and their interest was to pass a civil rights bill that would support the legislation that they had for 1964 for public accommodations. We thought that the situation was much more profound. People were being jailed. You know, the dog Medgar Evers had been killed. You know, there was a violence against us that the bill didn't deal with. So John came to express his views. I passed out the speech the night before. The Kennedy administration saw the speech and came, had Archbishop Boyle come to tell John and tell us that, you know, John had to change the speech, you know, with heavy criticism of the Kennedy administration. It was
Wow.
only after A. Philip Randolph came to us and that John Lewis, Jim Foreman, and myself decided to adjust the speech to not just condemn, but to just criticize the Kennedy administration. So John Lewis and Jim Foreman, myself and Mildred Foreman, 250,000 people were out there. We were in the back of the Lincoln Memorial making adjustments to John's speech in hand, you know, writing paper, making changes in the paper. And what I found so amazing and look back and so amazing is after all that confusion, John got up and gave a speech that nobody would have known that, you know, that changes to the speech had just been made. I mean, you know, imagine the pressure. I'm 22 years old. John is 23 years old. Imagine 23 years old going before a crowd of 250,000 people, the Kennedy administration saying you have to make the changes, we having to make the changes, and 10 minutes later, he gets up and delivers a good speech. So, I mean, I think, you know, that in itself was quite amazing.
What do you miss most about John Lewis? I mean, we hear so much. We talk about Good Trouble. The title tomorrow of the virtue event is Good Trouble. But what do you miss most about him?
You know, John Lewis was one of the bravest people I've ever met, and one of the most honest person. He was very clear about the issues of right and wrong. It wasn't, you know, all the shades of gray. It was very right and wrong. And you know, this is one example that people don't really know about. So in 1961, the freedom rides were going on, and the the massive resistance of the South decided that they were going to just use naked force to beat the bus drive. I mean, to beat the freedom riders. So, and they burned the bus and did all these kinds of things. And so the adults like Martin King and Roy, I'm not from Court, James Farm and so forth, said, look, this is too dangerous to continue the freedom rides. We need to stop the freedom rides. It was John Lewis and Diane Nash and others who said, no, we're going to continue the freedom rides. And even though they were told by the Justice Department that the Klan planned to kill them, they said, we have already made out our wills. We are going to continue this. And what's interesting, when we continued in the South, when we went to work in the counties in Mississippi and Alabama, we were known as freedom riders. People didn't know our names. They knew freedom riders. And what they associated with freedom riders are people who were brave, who were prepared to go in and fight fire with a feather.
Well, and you know, we know that one of the things that you and John Lewis and the others did well was strategize. In the face of so much oppression, the face of so much racism, we see a lot of that trying to basically make a comeback. Racism is really almost overwhelming at times today, is particularly in politics and in other areas. Politics drives it really, but what do you see or could be an effective strategy today? Is it any different than what the strategies you guys would have employed back in the 50s and 60s?
Yeah, I think basically in the 50, especially in the early days of the 1960s, we were engaged in protests because we didn't have the vote, we just had ourselves. And we could not really we couldn't go to, our mayors, we couldn't go to our congressmen, we couldn't go to our senators. So we engaged in protests. As time went on, beginning in Mississippi and in Lowndes County, Alabama, and other places, we began to move and try to get people to register to vote. And then once we did that, we tried to move to get them to engage in political power. And so my sense is, if you really look at what's happened over the past 60 years, especially on the racial front, we've been highly successful because, like, for example, the first black mayor was really in 1968 in Cleveland with Carl Stokes. Now every major city in the United States has a black mayor. If you look at who is going to be the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, it's a black man. And so we've made tremendous strides. But so what we now have is the resistance to the success that we had. And
Mhm.
therefore, what we have to have in our own mind is that this resistance will not stand. And so therefore we have, I guess that we have less than 18 months to really make a big statement in for not 2024, that we have to organize ourselves, we have to talk to our neighbors, we have to make sure that our children and others understand that this political, as John used to say, the vote is our the one of the greatest things that we have, and that we have to make sure that in 2024 that MAGA is buried, that people who want to harm us never hold political office. For example, the governor of Florida, the governor of Arkansas, whatever positions they have, if they were not in power, they could not harm us. And we need to make sure that no people like them are ever in power again. So that is what we have to determine that we have to do over the next 18 months. We need to organize our communities to make sure a statement is made in 2024, up and down the ballot, from the door catcher to the president, that people who are for us will be in office and people who are against us will not.
Do you see or feel that the will and fortitude of African Americans are different today than it was when you guys were fighting? I mean, was there more of a will then, and more unity, more fortitude to get it done than you see today?
No, I mean, my sense is this: the difference is that we're playing on a bigger stage. In 1960, we started out with the Woolworths. We started out with the Trailways. We started out with Greyhound. We started out with buses. We started out with public accommodations, and all that. Now we're talking about who controls this country. And that's a whole different level of involvement. We now have to, we were not in 1960s, we were not in the conversation about who controlled this country. Which country, what will this country be racist or diverse? We were not in that conversation. We put ourselves in that conversation. Well, we now need to exercise the strategies to make sure that we win. So we're now, before we in the South, we were local points and so forth. We're now on the national stage, and we now need to make sure that we build the coalitions that are going to make a difference nationally.
And with the benefit of hindsight, as obviously, how has the movement's progress influenced your perspective on the challenges and opportunities for achieving a more just and equitable society today?
You know, the one thing that I learned that's very humbling is that even if you succeed in doing what is necessary, it may not be sufficient.
Mm.
So we ended segregation in public accommodations. It was necessary, but it was not sufficient. We did a number of things in housing and jobs and voting and so forth, but we need to understand that that even though we do things that are necessary, they may not be sufficient. I mean, Miss Baker, Ella Baker, who really was the founder and organizer of SNCC, said to us back in 1960, when we were doing sit-ins at lunch counters, she said, the struggle is more than a hamburger. You've got to understand that even if you sat in and got the hamburger, there are other issues you had to deal with. And until we begin to deal with the big economic issues about who gets what in this country in terms of, food, shelter, clothing, and so forth, the struggle will continue, because that is the real sense is, do you have the economic and other wherewithal to live in a decent human condition? So I understand. The thing that I learned over the last 60 years is we have done a lot of things that were necessary and succeeded and kept us doing things that are important, but it was not sufficient. And that we realized that, and that once we realize that, we have to get others to help us do the other necessary things so we can get to self-sufficiency.
I understand Michael Collins, the longtime chief of staff to Congressman John Lewis, will be joining us in a moment. Talk again. Tomorrow is a big day, 4 o'clock. To tune into this virtual event. Where can people see this, and what can people expect from tomorrow's Good Trouble Talk?
I think the what people can hear from tomorrow's Good Trouble Talk is a sense of John Lewis's determination. I mean, I think that's the first thing. The second thing is the kind of strategies and tactics that we used in the 1960s. And third, and given that this is around the 60th of March on the 60th anniversary of March on Washington, some sense of what happened during that day and some of the adventures that we had to engage in to make sure that it was a successful event.
And I understand it's going to be moderated by someone from CNN. I lost her name. So, but
It's Lynn. She's from. You used to be with CNN.
okay. And so there is a link for folks to join in, right? And they can see
Yes.
this, they can watch this, right?
Yes, we really think it's important, because I think it's important for people to come and listen to this and join these kinds of things, because the most important thing that we can do at this point is win the battle for the hearts and minds. And the first and most important battle for the hearts and minds is our own hearts and minds. That because if we win the battle for our own hearts and minds, we will be determined to make the difference as we move forward. So the tomorrow in events like tomorrow and the program like tomorrow help people clarify what has to be done, what has been done, and how they get in their own mind, most importantly, in their own mind, how they need to be determined to make sure that we move to where we need to be in terms of human and civil rights.
And Dr. Thomas Braxton Jones says that you can't build a coalition without unity. You have to continue to strive to be better every day. Continuous building and education is what African Americans should focus on. And joining us now is Michael Collins, the longtime chief of staff to Congressman John Lewis. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing this morning?
Doing good. So, Mr. Collins, how do you feel that Congressman Lewis's legacy continues to shape the work of the foundation for which you are now, which you are a board member, and the ongoing pursuit of quote unquote good trouble?
I'm proud. I spent such a wonderful time of my life, 21 years working for the congressman. I met him when I was a freshman in college. And to know that we have this opportunity to continue his legacy, it's an honor. It is an absolute honor. And so many people are with me and in pursuit of just honoring the congressman's love and legacy. His legacy will live on in so many people, young and not so young, for the work that he and Mr. Cox did throughout their life and career.
Yeah, and Can you, well, this question really is for either one of you, but could you share some insights into the significance of commemorating the 60th anniversary of the march and how events like the Good Trouble Talk that's taking place tomorrow contribute to raising awareness and promoting change?
Go ahead, Mike.
Mr. Cox, well, what I will say is, you know, what the Congressman would say all the time is that you have to honor history. You have to know whence you came to know where you're going. And honoring the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington is a time to behold, again, of where we've been in the fight ahead and the work ahead. And we must commit ourselves to doing that work. Congressman Lewis would always say that, you know, our fight and commitment is one of a lifetime. And it's not just of a moment. And so this 60th anniversary of the March on Washington is a continuation of the work ahead in that fight that everybody, every generation that forms and comes into the fold must be a part of and commit themselves to.
Yeah, Mr. Cox was talking about the election next year and the importance, not just he said up and down the ballot, but what are outside of the election, what are some of the biggest challenges we face today? We still face that you guys faced during the march.
I mean, I think, you know, the march was for jobs and freedom. I mean, so people, I mean, I think when we talk about the march, people don't understand that usually to march for jobs and freedom.
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, when you talk on the question of freedom, that is to say the end of segregation and the desegregation of America, we were successful. You know, I just looked at the picture you had of John. You know, we were 23 years. John was a little older than I was 22. John was 23. You know, but I mean, and we, you know, the thing that we have to say is that you have to stay on the battlefield. And so my sense is that as we look at our situation in America, we can't say, well, we did this and we have this picture and therefore things were supposed to be different. No. The only thing that will make, the only life that you can, in fact, you know, live is one of continuous struggle. And one of the things that Miss Baker, I'm going back to Miss Baker again, her statement to us as we were in our 19 and 20 and 21 years old, she said to us, those who believe in freedom cannot come until it rests. And we have to understand that there is no resting if we want to continue the struggle for freedom. So we cannot say, well, we did this and therefore we expect this. No, we have to understand this is a continuous struggle for freedom. You know, John must have started, I was so we started in 60. You know, John continued for, 61 years. I guess he's passed maybe 2 years ago. You know, I'm now 63 years into it. And as they say in the church, there's a line that says, I've been running for Jesus a long time and I ain't got tired yet. I'm not tired yet. And therefore, it seems to me that is the message that we have to pass on, not about particularly events, but the way we think about the world, because the way we think about the world will create the world that we will live in.
Yeah, and Mr. Collins, these as Mr. Cox just pointed out, the struggle continues. Basically, Dr. Ben Chavis, our CEO, and of course, a civil rights icon in himself, always says the struggle continues. But what actionable steps do you believe individuals and communities can take to honor the legacy of John Lewis and contribute to a more equitable future? Oh, you went on mute, Mr. Collins, for some reason. There you go.
What people should do is commit themselves to getting involved at any level, in any circumstance, but get involved in something worthy and good, something passionate that you find yourself to be a part of. It's not enough to just sit on the sidelines and watch. but it's most important to just get involved where you are. Everybody has an opportunity to contribute, to turn the circumstances around. And when you do that, you form a community of people, and you build a movement. And that's what I think we have the opportunity to do. And I think that's what Congressman Lewis, his legacy is about. He, took a stance. He felt compassionate about picking up the pen and writing a letter to Dr. King when he was so young. And he wanted to make sure that his voice was heard. And Dr. King heard his voice. And Dr. King wrote him a letter back. And that was how he got involved in the civil rights movement. And so we don't have an opportunity anymore to just sit on the sidelines and watch things happen. We have an opportunity to get involved, and we need to take it.
Yeah, and before we let you guys go, Mr. Cox, I'm looking at what Dr. Thomas Braxton Jones Jr. wrote. He says this march should be about keeping our civil rights intact, save our history from being dismantled from American history. We need to continue to stop the discrimination and racism toward African Americans. We should be hungry for unity to be effective. And you were very much involved, as we know, in the struggle at the march, before the march, after the march. Like you said, 63 years in now. When you see in Florida the governor attempting to erase Black history, that includes erasing what you guys accomplished. When you see in Texas the governor trying to erase Black history, that includes what you guys accomplished. Give us your mindset when you see these things coming in the news almost on a daily basis, the banning of books, the critical race theory thing, and taking away courses in high schools and in colleges that represent, and then of course the most insidious of all statements, that somehow slavery benefited Black people. From where you sit, when you hear that type of rhetoric, give us your reaction.
Yeah, we understood that. I mean, this is not new. I mean, we had the books of Sambo, we had all these kinds of things. America was really based on the view that, one group is superior, the other group is inferior. So that's why we created SNCC Legacy Project. And specifically, if you go to the snclegacyproject.org, you can see the history. You can see John Lewis's speech at the March on Washington. You can see the original thing. You can see what we did in the 1960s, the way we organized and so forth. So that we've now saying you can't beat something with nothing, right? So we have something. That's the first responsibility. The second responsibility is a political one. The question, what my sense is, I don't care, what DeSantis or the governor of Texas or the governor of Arkansas thinks, as long as they're not in power. And I want to make sure that we have two-part program. First of all, we have to create and distribute our own history, telling it from the bottom up and from the inside out. That's job number one, because you can't beat something with nothing. But the second part is the political part. These people who want to propagate these policies should never see the light of day or political office. And so therefore, in order to make sure that they don't erase our history, we need to erase them from political office.
And you see in the folks, you could look in the comments sections and post it all over here. Our great producer, director, and manager and everything else has posted where you can join the Good Trouble Talk tomorrow at 4:00. It's vimeo.com/event and then /3650251. It's there for you to join this important discussion tomorrow. And with that, Mr. Collins, before we close, tell us some things that people can expect during tomorrow's discussion.
Tomorrow's discussion, we're honored and blessed to have Mr. Cox join us for a conversation. What I've recognized over the past few weeks is that there's so much information that's not known about the March on Washington and what went into it, and how this historic event was a catapulting moment for so much of the work that Congressman did and so many others went on to do. And so Mr. Cox is going to share with us the insight to that we must understand, again, in order to go forward. We've got to understand what it took to really put that march together and what went into it leading up to it. So tomorrow will be just a wonderful opportunity to hear and witness that. And we look forward to people getting involved as a result of that, whether it be with the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation or any organization. But the goal is to continue the Congressman's legacy and get involved.
We really appreciate you guys. Courtney Cox, a civil rights legend, a living legend of the civil rights movement, and Michael Collins, a member of the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation Board and longtime chief of staff to the late, great Congressman John Lewis. Thank you so much for joining the Black Presses. Let it be known this morning. And thank you all for watching. And join them tomorrow. It's posted on the website where you can join Good Trouble Talk, the Good Trouble Talk, tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern. We will see you then. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.